to continue the discussion with the book, with the recent book of yours, Witness. What is very interesting for me with the book is it's the collection of the images and the descriptions and a story with it, right? So you have a medium of filmmaking and a film, and now you have these images which are going to, in a way, stay within the book, or like probably there could be people who would take prints of it and would have it with them.
So, you know, the images that sparked off the book were actually images that I had encountered when I was researching my film, which is almost 10-15 years ago. And I had been very struck by how remarkable some of these images were, but simply because they were photojournalists, their work was kind of, consigned to the whatever, the scrap heap of history. So, people do remember images. They'll say, yes, Miraj Saab took that great picture, but now you don't know where it is. It's kind of, it's hazy, So I had always fantasized that what if one could collect some of these pictures and put them together in an interesting way? How wonderful it would be. And so that's how the book began. But at some point I realized that, okay, so, photographer 1, photographer 2, photographer 3, that I don't want to be repetitive. So how do you construct a narrative? It's not unlike a film, Yeah. And I started looking at the work of contemporary photographers, and I was so struck by what the work some of them were doing, and they're really exceptional photographers. And I could see that there was a kind of story, that it could be a book about Kashmir, which it is. Witness as a book is also a book about the 9 photographers. And who are they? What does it mean like to have grown up in the last 30 years in Kashmir? But ultimately, it's also in some senses about photography. Yeah. It's about changing ways of looking at the image. So when you come towards the end of the book, the youngest of the photographers was barely 20. He has a very different set of preoccupations. He's interested in very different things. And to me, that is as important, that how does something which begins in a very utilitarian, functional space, photo lena hai, chapna hai, agle din ke paper mein aana hai, how does that evolve into an artistic practice, Because ultimately, I do believe that art is central to our lives and to resistance and to struggle as well. You can't leave it out. Yeah. So I'm very fascinated by that whole process, and in a sense, putting that book together had all of that, for me, all those challenges of having to answer all those questions.
Definitely, because with the time of demand, if I can put it that way, for graphic representations and like graphic images, it's very disturbing to see, say for example, if someone has been assassinated, there are these graphic images of the body that get circulated. So it seems like images have this kind of circulation which crosses the border of say institutionalized screening, for example, like with filming. So here you just need a phone like to click a picture and like get it circulated.
Yeah, but one thing I want to say is that the book has a form of its own.
Has a form of its own.
Yeah. So I don't think that Witness, I would not have ever visualized it as a website, for example. Yeah. It could be, but it would be a very different experience. Yeah. That one would have to translate it into something like that. Whereas the book, a double spread of somebody lying on the street who's just been killed, it has you're forced to read it in a very different way, Yeah. So I think that in that sense, for me, the big excitement was experiencing that with the designers to maximize the ways in which a book and the surprises that a book can carry. How do you make that work for you,
Yeah. And my last question, in a way, getting back to what you said in response to the first question, with the internet and websites and the social media now, a book being accessible is not an issue anymore. you can access the book, but Witness, if I'm not wrong, it's not there on online. So do you plan on putting it up?
So, I've been asked this question. A lot of younger people, especially in Kashmir, told me that, the book is expensive, so why couldn't you make it cheaper? And I try to explain that, with the physical form that it has, it can't be much cheaper. But my question is, I also want to ask a question of this whole idea of the consumption of images. When I was growing up, if I wanted to watch a film, I couldn't go online and search for it and download it from torrent. I couldn't even find a VHS because there was no VHS then, and yet we did get to see stuff, right? So why do we assume that every cultural product must be available to us on tap? Why, if it's an expensive book, can't 10 people pool together and buy a copy, or find somebody who has a copy, go across town, which is what we did when we were growing up. If you were looking for a book, and it wasn't in a library, you found somebody who had it, you took a bus, I'm not making a fetish of that, but what I'm trying to say is that a piece of sculpture, for example, you can't make it infinitely reproducible, because the sculpture has a certain physicality of it. So if a book has a certain form, then I'm going to insist that you see it in that form, because the effect it's meant to have on you, it will be very profoundly shaped by how you deal with the book. In just the same way that you could watch Red Ant Dream on a phone, but if you do watch it on a screen with good sound, I can guarantee you that you will feel the meaning of that film in a very different and much more complex way. So I think I'm not a purist. I'm willing to show my films in any way, and in adverse conditions. I don't have a problem about that. But I think that I do also want to raise this question, that not everything that we want to see or hear is going to be available to you at the click of a button. That you'll have to make an effort, and it's like, you're dealing with the work. So you have to put in some effort, and then you have to deal with it.
So true. I mean, it's not only the effort of, say, watching a movie on the screen, but it's also about this coming together, which is, at the end of the day, I'm sure, is the message that you are also putting through your films in terms of forming resistance, right? Thank you so much, Mr. Kak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay tuned in.